In order to get to a much more technologically advanced future, we're going to have to restructure society in many different ways in order to get there. And the more we save, the more fluid and the faster we can make this process happen. At this point, we have discussed how competition and interest rate coordination are key mechanisms that help the market process shape a productive and prosperous social order. Next, we will briefly discuss government or the public sector. The most important thing to keep in mind when thinking about government or the public sector is that the knowledge that shapes its social order is not managed by the market process. Public sector bureaucracies are government monopolies. In government monopolies, the knowledge that shapes the social order arises within a single organization via a politicized process. While in the private sector, knowledge arises within each company as well as the competitors. And the freedom of the consumer to choose amongst various alternatives is what nourishes superior ideas and the subsequent social order that emerges from these ideas. And by starving the inferior ideas, one spawns this competitive process that forces everyone to copy the superior ideas, and this ensures that the private sector is always as efficient as humanly possible. Now, government monopolies are immune from such competitive knowledge-sharing mechanism because they always get the wealth they need in order to sustain themselves from the taxes that are taken from the consumers at the point of a gun. So wherever you live, the public sector, there's only one public sector bureaucracy, whether it's education, the municipal services, whatever the public sector tries to do, there's only one of them. You do not have a choice. So because of this and countless other reasons, the public sector will always keep growing to become this gigantic consumptive bureaucracy, regardless of the good intentions of the people who work in it. Then there are the examples of the various inefficiencies, like the famous bridge to nowhere, a bridge in Alaska that is going to join a tiny town with this little airport and is going to replace a 7-minute ferry ride that already does a great job. Then there are our educational bureaucracies. For example, the New York public education system consumes over $14,000 per year to educate a single student. That is over $280,000 per year to try to educate 20 kids. There are 12 states in our nation where for every single teacher, there are another 2 people pushing paper doing who knows what. So again, because of this lack of competition, which arises because of a lack of freedom, we inevitably get these consumptive cancers that are really what is destroying our prosperity. Another way in which the government inadvertently destroys prosperity is via government regulation. What really is a regulation? A regulation is just a way of doing things. It is a piece of knowledge that is discovered by the inferior Washington D.C. brain and then is forced upon the private sector via the law. Unlike knowledge that arises from in the private sector via the market process, and it's ever changing and always reflecting the very greatest ways of doing things, government regulations are static. They can only be changed via politicians, lawyers, lobbyists, and special interests trying to change the regulation to fit what they want as opposed to necessarily what is best for society. The more the government regulates, the more it starts dictating the workings of the private sector as opposed to being the market process. I mean, what is the real difference between the private sector and the government sector? The government sector is shaped by the Washington D.C. brain, by delegation. The private sector is shaped by freedom and the market process. So the more the government regulates, the more it starts making the private sector look like the government sector, bringing the very same inefficiencies and turning it into a gigantic consumptive bureaucracy. This is why as government regulations have increased in the healthcare sector, so have costs. In 1960, the healthcare sector consumed just 2% of the American economic pie, but today, thanks to the inefficiencies introduced by government regulation, it consumes over 17% and it just keeps on growing. Compare the heavily regulated healthcare sector to the technology sector. Since there is very little government regulation and meddling in the technology sector, the market process can shape its social order in a very efficient and productive way. Technologies are always arising, replacing old technologies. Prices are always going down, quality is improving. Compare this to something like the Food and Drug Administration, where it costs over $800 million to get a single new drug through its regulatory apparatus. The FDA is in a state of incompetent chaos. By its own admission, it said the following: the FDA science agenda lacks a coherent structure and vision, as well as effective coordination and prioritization. The FDA does not have the capacity to ensure the safety of food for the nation. Bill Hubbard, a former FDA Associate Commissioner, said the following: Imagine having an email system so old, they have to bring technicians out of retirement because current technicians have never seen equipment that old. The computer systems are down frequently, paralyzing whatever little progress this gigantic bureaucracy might actually achieve. Representative Rosa DeLauro, a Democrat from Connecticut, a harsh critic of the FDA, said the following: "I, for one, am not going to provide funds for an agency that has no management structure in place, doesn't have any idea how to utilize the funds that the Congress is providing to them." Little does Representative DeLauro know that this management structure that has the right idea of how to discover whether drugs are good or not can never come from a government regulatory monopoly. Only freedom and the market process can discover this important knowledge. Without an understanding of economics, she's going to fall for the tribal solution, which is to replace the people at the top of the FDA with people who she thinks will do a better job, but the result inevitably will be the same. Another regulatory bureaucracy that is very damaging to society is the American Medical Association. What does the American Medical Association try to do? It tries to fill human brains with medical-related knowledge. Now, I know doctors are very important people, but computer programmers can be just as important. Computer programmers write the software that runs medical equipment that keeps people alive. They write the software that keeps planes in the sky. They write the software that keeps our cars running. If tomorrow every single computer program were to malfunction, cars wouldn't start, people would die, planes would fall out of the sky, it would be a complete chaos. Now, if every doctor were to die tomorrow, it would be a huge calamity, but it still wouldn't be as bad as if every computer program suddenly started failing. Now, do we have an American Computer Programmer Association that licenses computer programmers, says who can or can't be a programmer, what they must learn in order to become one? And should a computer programmer write a computer program that does not adhere to some regulations, does he go to jail? Of course not. See, the way knowledge spreads through the brains of computer programmers in the technology sector, it happens via individual economic freedom, via privatization, via the market process. Therefore, it is efficient. It happens without an act of parliament. Congress has nothing to do with it. If you go to a bookstore, you're going to find hundreds of books on computer programming, and every couple of years, half of them are obsolete because the market process shapes the sector. Therefore, it is constantly discovering superior knowledge and replacing old ways of doing things. But when it comes to knowledge in the medical sector, that is dictated by the American Medical Association, which is another government monopoly, immune to competition and the market forces that are actually what spreads superior knowledge throughout society. We also have this propensity to believe that doctors have to be the super people and they have to be smart and hardworking and go through this strenuous educational process. But that is not what makes medicine work. What makes medicine work well is the market process. It is the competitive process that creates the medical technology that allows doctors to cure people so easily. The hardest working and the smartest doctor from the year 1900 would be in a complete disadvantage compared to a motivated high school student that had access to the internet and today's medical technology. I know, since we're dealing with people in the healthcare sector, we have to be a lot more careful. But this does not change things at a very fundamental level. Everything we want requires a transformation of matter, some kind of interaction with the real world around us. And these interactions require human action. And we want this human action to be guided by superior knowledge. So whether it is knowledge of how to make a cell phone, how to give a productive order to thousands of people who are involved in the medical sector or the technology sector, or how to cook a pizza, since it is knowledge that we're after in the modern social order, the best way to discover such knowledge and the social order that grows around it is to privatize and let the market process and the human supercomputer, via the incentives that exist in the private sector, be the ones that discover this knowledge. Most of the times when we ask the government to solve some problem, we are inadvertently destroying the workings of the market process, leading to far more harm than whatever little good the government can actually do for us. So we're done discussing economics for now. For the most part, we're not fighting some great battle of good versus evil. Evil doesn't really exist. There is our own human tribalism. There's a lot of economic ignorance. And without an understanding of economics, we are bound to keep falling for the same big government socialist ideologies. We keep believing that the solution to every problem is to take from the haves, to give to the have less, to have the government manage the social order. The failure of socialism in the 20th century should have taught us that government doesn't work, but we walked away with the wrong lesson. Somehow we believe that if we have a democracy, then if we get bad people to run the government, we can vote them out and get good people to run the government and still make society better off. But it's not democratic government that brings prosperity. It is individual economic freedom that brings prosperity. So that's pretty much it. I hope you have enjoyed these videos. Check out my channel. I hope to add more videos on other related topics. And please buy my book, Economics, the Social Order and the Ron Paul Revolution.